how many of the writers and framers and imaginers of the Constitution are now being metaphorically torn down. They're being hung in effigy. Their monuments are toppling. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Constitution Corner. Well, I think our topic for the Constitution Corner this week is obvious. How many of the writers and framers and imaginers of the Constitution are now being metaphorically torn down? They're being hung in effigy. Their monuments are toppling. Thomas Jefferson. Lincoln now is under assault. George Washington was beheaded. A statue of George Washington was literally beheaded at George Washington University. You cannot get more ironic than that. And how long is it before George Washington University has to rename itself DeRoy McKesson University, somebody from Black Lives Matter, because George Washington now has become not the father of the country, not one of the great patriots, not one of the great sacrificial generals in the history of the world, not one of the leading voices in the creating of a world-changing constitutional republic. No, George Washington now is nothing more than a slaveholder who must be purged from culture. And so we ask ourselves in Constitution Corner, what about the constitutional framers? What about Washington? What about Jefferson? Let's take a look at Thomas Jefferson for a moment. He is the architect, of course, of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Jefferson is a guy, there's a great comment that John F. Kennedy once made about Thomas Jefferson when he was having a bunch of Nobel Prize laureates at the White House for dinner. And there were a bunch of them there in the room, and Kennedy got up to give a toast, and he said, this is probably, he said, the greatest collection of brain power ever assembled in the White House since Thomas Jefferson dined here alone. Now, of course, it's a bit of an apocryphal story in the sense that the White House did not exist in Jefferson's day, but you get the point. Kennedy was correct. Perhaps the most brilliant intellectually of all the founding fathers, and certainly the most influential, was Thomas Jefferson. And the fact is that Jefferson inherited about 167 slaves from his parents. But this is also the same Tom Jefferson who tried to write slavery out of the Constitution of the United States. It was put back in by the Congressional Congress to keep southern states as part of the new alliance. He also spoke repeatedly about getting rid of the evil of slavery. He was not a fan of it. And one of the reasons he didn't release his own slaves is because in a country like the one that we had founded, there were no place for them to go where they could be free men, right? Because it was not the concession had been made to establish the Union and keep slavery in the South because that was a deal breaker. And so whatever you say about Thomas Jefferson, he created one of the most politically progressive documents in the history of the world. What he did and his cohorts in the Declaration and the Constitution was to write a document unprecedented in human history that superseded Magna Carta, that superseded anything else that had gone before it in the establishment of individual rights and liberties, the protection of peoples regardless of their religious affiliation or lack of it, their freedom of speech right guarantees. These things Jefferson did. He was, when it comes to politics, he was hundreds of years ahead of his time. Even though in the fact that he inherited slaves and he didn't, I'm not sure what he would have done with them, liberate them and then let them go, where they would have been picked up by the next slaveholding family or send them back to Africa somehow. If Jefferson had freed his slaves and boated them right back to Africa, I'm pretty sure the people who want his statues taken down would still want them taken down for his cruelty. So the question becomes this from a constitutional question too. To what degree do we have the right to condemn people who lived in worlds that weren't ours? It seems to me that the entire anarchistic nonsense that we're seeing with these monuments being destroyed is based on badly educated kids. It all comes back to education. Kids with really bad public school and really bad public university educations. They actually believe that Thomas Jefferson is the embodiment of slavery, right? That he is everything it says. Just today, right before we came on the air, at Portland State University, goofy kids, college kids, toppled a statue of Thomas Jefferson, and they can be seen talking to the statue as if it's alive. How you like that, Jefferson? And they actually take bats and start beating the statue as if they are actually engaging in life-threatening violence against Jefferson himself. I have no doubt, if you teleported Jefferson back to the world today, I think there are huge swaths of progressive youngsters and progressive older people, too, who would feel perfectly content and perfectly justified in beating his brains out in the public square. This is the endemic ignorance and violence of these movements. The statue of Matthias Baldwin in Philadelphia, a 30-year abolitionist who labored to get rid of slavery before the war was fought in the 19th century, his statue has been vandalized. The city of Boston today decided they're going to remove the statue, the monument of Abe Lincoln the Emancipator that they paid for and put there to celebrate the stop of slavery. They're getting rid of it now because it too has to be canceled. If you're canceling your friends as well as your enemies, if you're canceling all of history for a movement that is 10 minutes old, then maybe you are part of the problem and not part of the solution. It sure would be nice if adults stopped listening to kids throwing tantrums. I'm Dr. Duke, and this has been Constitution Corner. Don't just know your Constitution, live it. This has been Liberty News Hour. As always, you can go to thenewamerican.com and jbs.org for more stories like this.